Hello, welcome to another video with Steve, your Cambridge English teacher, and today we're looking at C1 Listening Part 3. In my opinion, the most difficult part of the listening, simply because they are very abstract, difficult topics with lots of text and complex ideas. So how can you practice this? How can you get better at it? What skills do you need to keep in mind when you're doing it? Let's watch in this video. So the format of this part of the exam is always the same. It's an interview or conversation, meaning there's at least two speakers, the interviewer and the person responding. You need to listen to both of them because sometimes the answer can be given by the interviewer. Sometimes there's two people being interviewed, but it's normally just one. Often one question on the audio follows a question on the paper. You see what I mean? One question in the interview. So you more or less guess where you are by keeping count. There's always 6 questions with 4 options, and they're always quite long, so you've got a lot of reading to do. We're going to talk about that, as we said, and lots of distractions. They are all mentioned, so it's eliminating them, really keeping on top of it. Skills you need then. Well, the first one is, like I've been saying, attention. You are reading and listening, meaning it's just you cannot get distracted for 1 second. Even as a teacher, this happens to me sometimes, but you really have to be on your game for the whole time. In that moment, completely dedicated to reading and listening what's happening. You can eliminate the wrong options, you can think about possible answers, you can make notes. I think this helps a lot. When I started doing these, I was always noting down, well, she said, this could be this. Feel free to take notes while you're doing it. This one I say for every listening, but an idea of the situation. I hate it when I think, who are these random people talking about random things? No, it's an architect talking about her job. Okay, then I can imagine she's going to be talking about why she designs houses in this modern eco-friendly manner. Okay, I can understand this. She's going to talk about the doors and the windows not letting in or out the cold. Okay, you have some more grasp of what is happening because you've understood the situation. And as always, it's C1. They should be quite typical, debatable, conversational topics that they're talking about. Like I just said, architecture. Okay, if you're widely read, if you're paying attention to the world, you can have some ideas about architecture. You can sort of predict what they're going to be talking about. You've got an idea already of the possible answers. Then when you're doing it, I would go with the common recommendation of trying to write something down the first time, even if it's just a guess or you're eliminating one. At least on the second listen, you've got a bit less work to do. If you don't do anything the first time, when you listen the second time, it's like starting from zero. So it's better to at least, even if you just underline something the first time, cross something out, put a question mark, put 1 or 2 words, at least you've done something the first time. And here's what we're going to be working on this video. A lot of part 3 is just, what did they say? Like they will say something and then you have 4 options to say which one most closely corresponds to what they said. They can phrase that in different ways, but that's basically what it comes down to. So we're going to practice this. We're going to practice it like I like to do with the listening by really breaking down a single question, thinking about what they said. How do we go from what they said to this answer? We eliminate them, we think about the best one. So in this one, we've got a typical work listening and a woman called Anita who admits feeling unsure about leaving a job with a big company because... So you can guess the topic already is she's going to go and be self-employed. Big company gives you more security, gives you, health insurance, all these kind of things. You're with your colleagues. You maybe have less responsibility compared to working by yourself. So this is the topic. So you've got an idea what it's about. Why was she unsure? She lacked experience. She was concerned about finance, doubted her ability to work for herself, anxious about colleagues' opinion. Lots of these words are like key C1 words that I'm already thinking of synonyms for. So to lack experience, maybe she's going to say, I didn't have enough, I hadn't done enough of that type of work before. Yeah, sufficient, enough. Lacked, not enough. Finance, we're thinking about money. We're thinking about earning money. We're thinking about salaries, budgets, the typical finance words that come up on a C1 exam. Work for herself, this is being independent. By yourself, on her own, independent, and so on. And anxious, well, worried, concerned, I wasn't sure, these kind of things. Here's what she actually says then. I'll read it in Anita's voice, and as I'm reading it, you can read along. You can think, it should be a lot easier when we're reading it and there's only one question and we've taken a lot of time. But that's why we're starting like this, to make it easier. Then it gets more difficult. So read it, think about what's the answer and why. Anita says, Anita, tell us about your decision to go freelance. And basically, I'd been working in a well-paid position for some time, and I was undeniably proud of the fact that people at the company viewed the stuff I produced very favourably. No job's secure in today's economic climate, and I realised being employed wasn't necessarily as safe as I'd thought. I began a transition, doing freelance work on the side, and gradually building up a client base. My only doubt was whether this would be enough to rely on to cover the salary and perks I'd lose by going it alone. Anyway, I've always been an independent person, and the idea of being my own boss was ultimately irresistible. Okay, they're all mentioned, aren't they? They are pretty much all mentioned, and we can go through it and think, what does it tell us? Well, first of all, she's going freelance, she's leaving a big company. We know we're on this question. You know anyway, because I've put it there, but in the exam, it's a little confirmation that, okay, here we are, I'm focusing on this part now. So she'd been doing this for some time. This doesn't sound like lacking experience, does it? Some time is a way of saying a long time. People viewed the stuff favourably. She doesn't seem to worry about her colleagues. They viewed her work well, they view it favourably. My only doubt was about covering the salary. She's worried about money. This is B. And then C, working on her own is irresistible. She can't resist it. She wants to do it. She doesn't doubt this. So it's not C. So it is B. She's worried about money. She's concerned about financial prospects. She has a doubt about relying on the new salary. We can see how it's B, hopefully. Obviously in the exam, we don't have all this, but the skill is thinking, okay, doubt, salary, well, yes, I think this is B. Maybe you don't get all the other ones, but you're seeing doubt, salary, and you're seeing, what did she say? She said B. Now you can see quite clearly. With more practice, you don't need to go like this. You can do it faster. You can pick it up. With 2 listens, you should be able to pick that up. So the skill here, identifying the detail of what she said. Financial prospects, doubt about the salary. Okay. Another example. This one's a different one. Again, it's work focused. We've got a woman called Julia talking about her workplace principles, and we need to know what she learned from the work of Jennifer Alderton. To make sure she was respected, a concept of power she found acceptable, the importance of persuading staff, or the belief in what you're doing is essential. She learned that belief is essential. These all sound quite plausible. These are all things that are important in work. So what does she say? It is important that everyone realizes they are important in a company, that every individual is as important as any other, isn't it? One of the first female management gurus, Jennifer Alderton, put forward as her articles of faith, respect for all staff. She introduced me to the concept of power with rather than power over. Usually when power is discussed, it's taken to mean having power over someone else, getting that person to do what you want him to do, either through actual physical means or through persuasion. Okay, so this one's a little more complicated. It's a little more indirect. Let's think again about what she's saying. So we know it's Jennifer Alderton. We know we can start paying attention. She says Jennifer Alderton says respect for all staff is important. But this is not the same as saying she is respected by all staff. They respect staff, not them respecting her. A typical trick of subject-object. That means A is impossible. A new concept. She's doing this, and she's saying power with rather than power over. There's a little implication here that she's saying, this old one of power over, I prefer power with, this new concept that she agrees with, that she found acceptable. So B's looking good. What about C? Persuading staff. It means you can do this. It normally means this, but not for them. She's saying you have to have power over them to persuade them, but not for me. And for D, well, this is not really mentioned at all. It's just the typical, maybe the interviewer says it, something about the importance of everyone being important and importance and so on, but it's not really mentioned. So the skill here then I would say is implication. By the fact that A, C and D are not possible, not mentioned, and by the fact that she says this is a concept of this rather than this, we can see that it's a new concept and she finds it acceptable. It's implied that she agrees with it by the way she's talking about it. A little bit more challenging, that one, thinking about the implication of the ideas. Let's do another one from Julia. This one a slightly different skill. Thinking about a typical debate that you could have. So the debate about work-life balance. How much should we work? How much should we focus on our life? Do we work to live, live to work? You know this debate. She's talking about this debate, so you need to follow her arguments in the debate. And she says this debate has been helped by international barriers breaking down, workers becoming more assertive, well-known people favouring time away from work, or an increasing number of women taking on top positions. Let's see what she says. Which one of these does she say? And at the same time, recognising that it's crucial for people to have a balance between their work and home life. Yes, and this is an issue which has been widely discussed in many countries, and there have been some high-profile men and women who have given up highly paid responsible jobs because of the demand it was making on their time to spend more quality time with friends and family. The fact that these people were in the public eye has moved the debate on no end. I think where we need to go with this now is helping other countries where it is less acceptable for people to say, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm off now, to realise that good workers are alert workers who've enjoyed their free time and have slept well. So a complicated debate, but only one of these can be possible. It can't be D, because she says men and women have given up their jobs. So D, women taking on top positions. Well, firstly, no, we're talking about men and women, and also we're talking about giving up their jobs, not taking on their jobs. High-profile people have given up time to spend it with their family, and this has moved the debate on no end. So moved the debate on means helped the debate. And they're spending time away from work, they're spending time with friends and family. C seems to fit. Other countries are mentioned, so we're thinking something about international barriers, but nothing about this helping the debate. It's saying we should help other countries, not that this is helping the debate. And B, these workers need to say this, but they are not saying it. Hypothetically, they would be more assertive, but she's just saying, oh, they should say this, but they don't. We need to help them say this, so workers are not being more assertive. It is C. To get the answer here, understand the debate. What point is she making in this debate about work-life balance? She's making the point that when important people give up their work to spend time with family, we can help this debate more because we can understand, oh, it is okay to not just focus on work. That's what you get if you follow these complicated debates. Right, we're going to finish then with a full exam. I think we can do this now. We've practiced a lot. Try to apply all these skills I've been talking about. Put yourself in the situation. Read the questions carefully. Give it all your attention. Think about what he is saying, which one fits the best. Obviously, you can listen twice. I'm only going to play it once, but you can put the video back, go back 3 or 4 minutes and listen again. In the exam, the same as here, you can have 70 seconds to read the options. So pause the video for 70 seconds to read them carefully. And let's listen.
My guest today is the archaeologist Julian Radwinter, who works at Dunstan University. Julian, welcome.
Hi.
Tell us about how you first got involved in archaeology. What attracted you to it?
Well, it all started when a team of archaeologists came to dig up the field next to my parents' farm one summer. It was an exciting prospect for a teenager, and despite strict instructions from my father not to make a nuisance of myself, it wasn't long before I was roped in to lend a hand, on a purely voluntary basis, of course. But there's always a need for someone to do the fetching and carrying on such digs, and I was full of questions. That's the sort of boy I was, and I guess it broke up the day for those involved in the more tedious work. Anyway, I was in my element, and from then on, there was no question what subject I was going to study at university.
And does the subject still hold the same fascination?
Well, yes. I mean, on that dig, some strangely shaped metal objects were unearthed, clearly carbon datable to the time of the buildings they'd already found traces of. But this object didn't seem to fit in with anything they'd found. And this is exactly the kind of puzzle that makes the subject so gripping. You have a fragmented object and some contextual information, but clearly pieces of information are missing and need to be filled in by the archaeologist. You have to make assumptions, interpretations based on the evidence you've got. And that often involves eliminating possibilities, ticking off the things it might be, but clearly isn't. At the end of the day, it's still mostly conjecture, so the debate continues.
Mm-hmm. Do you think archaeology gets the recognition it deserves as a profession?
Well, people think of archaeology and they think of ancient civilizations, buried treasure, and all sorts of romantic notions, often stemming from the mythology surrounding startling 20th century discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Nile Valley. All that's fueled by the image projected by certain feature films that beguile people into the idea that archaeology is a glamorous discipline. I have no problem with any of that, but everyday archaeology actually involves a lot of painstaking gathering of data, often in far from romantic surroundings. You get cold, wet and dirty. And the discoveries are mostly small and cumulative rather than dramatic, which is the point that the world at large really tends to miss. Nonetheless, it is a science, and it has a lot to tell us, and the data is actually surprisingly accessible to ordinary people in the way that a lot of science isn't.
Which brings us neatly on to your own current research post. Why have you decided to concentrate your efforts on southeastern England?
Well, most of my colleagues are jetting off around the world, digging in remote spots in faraway places. It calls for a lot of organisation and involves all manner of setbacks and frustrations, not to mention tedious long-haul flights and endless inoculations. But I have none of those problems. Indeed, now that archaeology is becoming much more oriented towards the collection and analysis of data rather than just locating and digging up key sites, we come to realise just how much England has to offer. Basically, with a relatively modest budget, we can gather far more relevant data here than in many of the places that have been the typical focus of archaeological activity.
But why is that? And what is it that you're hoping to find?
Well, for the last 2,000 years, and probably long before that too, southeastern England has undoubtedly been one of the most densely inhabited parts of the world. There was a lot of human activity here, and the evidence is to be found beneath our feet. The land's been intensively farmed since the Iron Age, and most modern-day villages have been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years, some much longer. But I find it tantalising to think that you've only got to dig a hole somewhere in a settlement, and you'll probably uncover data that'll reveal how people lived and the way different things influenced their way of life, be it political changes, climate change, disease, or whatever.
Finally, Julian, you're taking part in a project that looks at the role of humour in archaeology. That sounds intriguing. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, traditional storytelling, the passing on of ideas and deep cultural knowledge, is one of those things that we're tending to lose with the digital age, and it struck me that it's there in archaeology itself. There's often a mismatch between the dry reports written up after successful digs and the warmth and intimacy that is built up within a team. Basically, you're all living and working cheek by jowl for long periods, and a kind of camaraderie develops. The telling of anecdotes around the campfire after a long day's digging is full of humour, but also full of the folk memory of archaeology itself. The project I'm involved in seeks to capture and preserve some of that rich fund of humour and anecdote, so that it can be preserved for future generations, along with the archaeological evidence itself.
Fascinating. Thank you very much for coming.
Now play the recording again.
Oh, I was going to say it. I didn't know he was going
That
to
is
say
the
it.
end of part 3. Now turn to part 4.
All right, calm down. play it again, feel free to play it again. Or if you don't need to because you're ready, great. But go play it again. And we're going to look at the answers. So think about what are the answers and think about why. As always, you're aiming for 4 out of 6, 60% on this part of the exam. So why was he interested? His curiosity. He said it was an exciting prospect and he was full of questions. And the others, it didn't fit. He was fine on his farm. He did it himself. He wasn't pleasing his father and he was voluntary. He didn't need the money. What still excites him today, this was more complicated, but it's D. He talked about finding fragments, so as in you need to build it up, making assumptions like making a theory, filling in information, again, not enough facts. So D is the one that fits the best. The other one, it seemed methodical, but he didn't say that was so exciting. He didn't talk really about solving long-standing. He said some of it, you don't know what it's about, but he didn't talk about solving it. And he mentioned carbon dating, but he didn't say that's what's exciting. Number 17, we should have C. People underestimate what it's really like. Discoveries are actually small and cumulative, meaning gradual, rather than not dramatic. That's the point the world tends to miss. The other ones, he said, no, it is a science, and we understand that. Negatively influenced, he says people get the wrong idea, so you could sort of see from films, but okay. C is a better answer, as we often say for C1. It's not about, well, B maybe could be if you're a bit generous with the interpretation, but C is much more clearly correct. And D, no, he said it's painstaking, but that just means methodical. It doesn't really mean physically painful. Number 18, how does he feel about this one? Well, he's got a modest budget. Again, money vocab. It's a modest budget. You can gather lots of relevant data, so it's cost effective. He doesn't really want to travel, so it's not a problem. He doesn't say they don't take it seriously, and he says he doesn't have these problems, so it's not C either. What's the point of this research? Well, that's C. It's about how people lived and the way things influence their life, like climate change and politics, wider trends. These are big things. He mentions population levels, but he doesn't say that this is the aim of his research. The same, he mentions that there's been villages for a long time, but he's not trying to do that. And agriculture, maybe I fell asleep for 3 seconds, but I didn't hear anything about agriculture, about digging and fields, but not about agriculture. And the last one, what is this project doing? This was a complicated one, but your key point was from A. We are going to lose a lot of this with the digital age. So it's unrecorded. We're going to lose this because we're losing this sense of warmth and intimacy in a team that they want to celebrate in their project. They want to capture in this project what it feels like to be on an architectural dig and this kind of the jokes and the stories and all that. So A, they are celebrating something that's not recorded otherwise. Not comparing it. They don't mention any kind of jokes, archaeological jokes. What do you call an archaeologist with a spade on his head? Doug. Other archaeological jokes, I'm not sure I know any. And making them more accessible. No, he compares them and says they're not very easy to read, but he doesn't say we're going to change that. So there you go. There's your 6 answers for part 3. I hope you did well, and I hope you understand how to get to the answers. And you can keep practicing, you can keep improving. How are we going to do that? That's my last comment. To keep practicing, well, I recommend watching TV series, watching reality shows for hearing normal English that you might hear here. I'm at the moment quite addicted to cooking shows. I've been watching, obviously, Great British Bake Off. I've been watching Gordon Ramsay and his reality show. I've been watching American Test Kitchen, which is a really good one. And Alone. Everyone should be watching Alone. Why should you be watching these things? Well, they're going to give you the same kind of skills that you will need in this exam. Skills that we've been talking about. Who said what fits with what they said, and so on. And of course, more part 3 exams. A good trick I recommend for C1 a lot is to start with B2. B2 has this same part of the exam. It's the same, isn't it? Or is it part 4? I think it might be part 4 in B2 because they swap them around a bit. Yeah, I think it's part 4, isn't it? The multiple choice part. It's the same skill. It's reading and listening. So you're using the same skills, thinking, okay, he said this, so it must be this, can't be this. Exact same skill, but at B2 it's slightly clearer, slightly more accessible. So it's a great way of warming up, practicing these skills. Then obviously move on to your C1 exams as well. Right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it's helpful. Come back another time for some more listening.